The house was small, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 memories. Its mud brick walls glowed faintly in the dying light, softening everything it touched: the old carpet, the clay cups, the quiet corners where shadows stretched long. A kettle hissed on the stove, sighing like an old friend. On the low wooden bed, covered with a faded quilt, sat Amy January. Her body was bent, shoulders slopped, but her presence filled the room with something larger than flesh, something like history. Her profile caught the sun, a map of wrinkles etched by time and endurance. Beside her, perched on a short stool, was Yusuf, only 9, messy-haired, eyes wide, notebook clutched in his hands. Sometimes he scribbled, sometimes he just held it, as if waiting for words to fall like treasures. "Daddy, will you tell me a story today?" he asked softly. Her thin hand reached for his head, both fragile and firm. "A story? I have many. Which one do you want?" "Your story." The words hung in the room like a prayer. She closed her eyes. Memories were heavy, and hers were heavier than most. Yet his innocence carried light. Perhaps he could hold her darkness without being crushed. "My life is not a fairy tale," she said gently. "It is made of fire and ash, of loss and survival, but also of love. Always love. That is what kept me alive." Yusuf leaned forward, fingers curling into hers. Her skin was paper thin, veins like blue rivers, but he held her as though he could keep her from breaking. "I was not always old," she began. "Once, I was a girl like your sisters. I ran through the fields, my hair flying behind me. I laughed loudly, dreamed foolish dreams. My hands were strong, then they could weave, cook, draw water from the well. They could hold the world." She lifted them now, thin and trembling. Yusuf studied them carefully. "They look like maps," he whispered. She chuckled, a dry sound. "Yes, each line a journey. Do you see this scar?" She pointed to her wrist. "I burned myself making bread at 10. My mother laughed and said, 'Now you will never forget how fire teaches.'" Yusuf traced the mark, his eyes glowing with wonder. "And this one," she said, pointing to a deeper scar, "came from carrying bricks during the war. My hands bled, but we built anyway." "War?" Yusuf frowned. "Yes," she whispered. The room dimmed. "That story will come later." The horizon outside had shifted from orange to deep purple, shadows stretching across the fields, a cow lowed in the distance, and somewhere a mother was calling her children home. Life outside went on, unaware of the story beginning inside the little room. "When I was your age, Yusuf," Amy Jan said softly, "the world was different. We had no notebooks, no pens, no bright electric bulbs. Life was simple, yet hardship was always near. Hunger followed us like a shadow." Her eyes clouded. "Some nights, my brothers and I slept with nothing in our stomachs but water. Do you know what that feels like?" Yusuf shook his head. "It feels like your bones are hollow," she whispered, "as if your body is fading from the inside. The hunger gnaws, not just at your belly, but at your spirit." Still, we endured. We always endured. Her hand trembled as she spoke. Yusuf pressed his small palm against hers, steadying her. She looked at him with both sorrow and love. "Daddy, did you cry a lot when you were little?" he asked. Her lips quivered. "Yes, Beta. I cried when my doll broke, when my shoes tore, when my belly ached. But I learned something: crying does not fill the stomach. Tears do not build a house. Only strength does. Only patience." The kettle whistled again, louder this time, steam curling upward like a spirit. Yusuf jumped up and poured tea into 2 clay cups, placing one carefully into her hand. "You're learning to take care of me already," she smiled faintly. "That is good. One day, you will have to." Alarm flashed in his eyes. "No, Daddy, you will always be here." Her smile deepened, but her gaze carried the truth he could not bear. "No one is always here, Yusuf. That is why we tell stories. So even when we are gone, our words remain." The silence that followed was no longer heavy but sacred. It felt as if even the mud walls were listening, holding every word like a treasure. She leaned back, her voice softer now. "I will tell you of my childhood, the sweet parts first. The village where I was born, the river that sang outside our home, the nights filled with stars so bright they felt like lanterns hung for us. Those were sweet beginnings. Her breath trembled. Though the sweetness did not last long, Yusuf leaned closer, notebook open, pen ready. The past had begun to unfold in earnest. Ami Jan's gaze drifted past the window into the depths of memory. The world soon grew dark, Yusuf. War came, and with it fire and fear. I was still a child, yet my hands learned the weight of bricks. The ache of carrying water for the wounded. My mother would say, strength is born in the hands that do not stop. Even when they bleed, her voice wavered, but she pressed on. We lost people, neighbors, cousins, friends. Graves filled faster than we could count. But we learned something in those years. Even when the world burns, love survives. Families huddled together. Mothers gave their last bread to children. Strangers shared what little they had. That is what kept us alive. Yusuf's eyes shone, wide with both fear and wonder. His small hand clutched hers tightly, as though anchoring her to the present. You see these wrinkles? She whispered, lifting her frail hands again. They are not just age, they are stories. Each one holds sorrow and love together. Do not be afraid of them. One day, your hands will carry stories too. He studied them in silence, then scribbled something into his notebook. She leaned closer and caught the words, maps of love. Her lips trembled into a smile. Yes, Beta, that is exactly what they are. The night deepened, the room filled with the hum of crickets and the warmth of tea. Remember this, Yusuf, she said finally, her voice slow but firm. Life will not always be kind. You will know hunger, loss, maybe even war. But never let bitterness take root. Patience, faith, and love, these are what carry us through. Yusuf nodded, though the weight of her words was bigger than his years. Still, he felt their truth. They sank into his heart like seeds, waiting for their time to grow. She kissed his forehead, her lips trembling. One day, when I am gone, tell my stories again. Let my voice live through yours. Promise me. I promise, Dottie, he whispered. And in that quiet mud brick house, under the gaze of stars, a boy's heart became the keeper of a legacy.
The lamplight flickered softly in the corner now, replacing the sun that had slipped fully behind the hills. Shadows lengthened across the walls, turning the little room into something both intimate and vast. The boy leaned closer to his grandmother, his eyes fixed on her face as though each wrinkle were a doorway into another world. Ami Jan drew the quilt tighter around her shoulders. Her tea steamed gently, untouched, forgotten in the swell of memory. I was born in a village so small, she began, her voice carrying the rhythm of distant drums, that if you stood on one end, you could see the smoke rising from the stoves on the other. The air smelled of earth and river, of wood smoke and animals. And in the evenings, when the fields fell quiet, you could hear the lullabies of mothers floating from every house, weaving together into one great song. Her eyes softened as the memory wrapped around her like a shawl. I was the second child, she said. Not the eldest, not the youngest. I was somewhere in between, loved, but never spoiled. My father was a farmer, his hands dark and cracked like old leather. My mother, she was the heart of our home. She had laughter that could make even the tired walls glow. And when she sang, Yusuf, when she sang, it was as if the stars leaned closer to listen. Yusuf tilted his head. Did she sing to you, Dottie? Yes, Beta. Every night. She would stroke my hair and hum songs older than time. I can still hear them when I close my eyes. For a moment, the old woman did close her eyes. And Yusuf watched as her lips moved faintly, recalling words he could not hear. Her face softened, lines smoothing just a little under the glow of memory. But childhood was not just songs, she continued. There was work, too. From the time I could walk, I carried water from the well. The bucket was heavy, and sometimes it spilled, but I learned. We were poor, Yusuf. Very poor. Every grain of rice was counted, every drop of oil treasured. And yet, there was joy. We children made our own toys from sticks and stones. We ran in the fields until our feet were raw. We climbed trees and thought ourselves kings of the world. Her smile faltered then, replaced by a faraway sadness. I remember one evening in particular. The sky was the color of ripe mangoes. And I was chasing my little brother by the river. He stumbled, fell, and scraped his knee. He cried, oh, how he cried. And I laughed at first. But then my mother came running, and she scolded me, saying, never laugh at pain, child. Even a scratch carries weight. Those words, I never forgot them. Perhaps because life proved her right, again and again. Yusuf shifted, his small brow furrowed. Did you get hurt too, Dottie? Her eyes glistened in the dim light. Yes, Beta. More times than I can count. But a child's hurts heal. It is the heart's wounds that stay. She fell quiet, her gaze drifting toward the wooden shelf where a clay lamp burned low. Shadows trembled against the wall like restless spirits. When I was 12, she said at last, her voice lower. Heavier, a storm came. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The wind howled like a beast, tearing at our roof. Rain poured so hard it turned the ground into rivers. Our fields drowned that night. Crops we had tended for months, gone in a single night. My father sat in silence for hours, his face buried in his hands. I had never seen him cry before. That was the first time I understood that grown men could weep. Her hand trembled slightly. Yusuf, instinctively, placed his tiny hand over hers again. Did you help him? He whispered. I tried, she said softly. I carried water, I fetched firewood. I helped my mother cook with what little we had. But what can a 12-year-old do against hunger? The storm left us with nothing. That year, we went to bed with empty stomachs more nights than I can count. I learned what it means to chew slowly, to make one piece of bread last an hour. I learned that hunger makes your mind sharp but your body weak. Her voice broke, and for a moment she pressed the edge of her scarf to her eyes. But even then, she said after a pause, life gave us small gifts. A neighbor who shared lentils when we had none. A stranger who gave my father work for a day. And my mother, always my mother, who kept us alive not just with food, but with hope. She told us, the night is long, but the dawn always comes. I clung to those words. Yusuf. I carried them with me my whole life. The boy's eyes shone in the dim light. He had never thought of food as something that could vanish. Never imagined the pain of watching a father's silence or a mother's quiet strength. His small fingers tightened around hers as though to anchor her here. In this moment, away from the storms of the past. What games did you play, Dottie? He asked suddenly, his child's heart searching for a lighter thread. A smile tugged at her lips. Games. We played hide-and-seek among the mango trees, though the boys always cheated. We tied scraps of cloth to sticks and called them kites. And oh, how high they flew when the wind was kind. Sometimes, we simply lay on our backs in the fields and made shapes out of clouds. I saw castles, horses, even ships in those clouds. And for a little while, I believed I could sail away in them. Her eyes grew distant again. But clouds drift, Yusuf. And so did childhood. Too soon, I was no longer allowed to run freely, no longer allowed to laugh as loudly. I was told I was growing up. That I must learn to cook, to sew, to carry not just water, but responsibility. She looked at him then, her gaze sharp and tender at once. Do you know what responsibility means, Yusuf? He bit his lip. It means doing something important? Yes, she said. It means carrying weight. Sometimes your own, sometimes the weight of others. And once you begin, Beta, it never leaves you. Not until the end. The boy shivered slightly, though the room was warm. The way she spoke of responsibility made it sound like both a duty and a burden. Something beautiful yet unescapable.
The kettle had gone quiet now, the last of its steam fading into the air. Outside, the crickets sang louder, filling the silence between her words. Emmy Jen leaned back, her eyes heavy with the pull of old memories. That was my girlhood, Yusuf. A childhood of hunger and play. Of storms and laughter. Of lessons I did not yet know I was learning. I did not know then how much darker the road ahead would become, or how strong I would have to be. Her voice faded into a whisper, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The boy stared at her, his heart aching though he did not fully understand why. The old woman stared at the flickering lamp, as if it were a window into the past she could never truly leave. And in the quiet, the bond between them deepened, one giving, the other receiving, both holding on to something larger than themselves. A story that was just beginning.
The night had deepened outside, the sky thick with stars. But inside the little room the lamp's flame still held steady. Yusuf's head rested lightly against his grandmother's arm, as though he feared the story might slip away if he let go. Emmy Jan took a slow breath. Her eyes had grown distant, heavy with memories darker than the childhood storms she had just recalled. Yusuf, she began softly, the world I grew up in was not kind. You must understand, there are storms of the sky, and there are storms of men. The storms of men are worse. Her voice dropped, threaded with something old and brittle. I was a girl, barely in my teens, when the first whispers reached our village. Whispers of war. Whispers of borders, of strangers becoming enemies overnight. At first, we did not believe it. How could we? The river still flowed, the mango trees still gave fruit. Children still laughed in the fields. But whispers grow, Yusuf. And then? They become fire. She paused, the lamplight catching the sheen in her eyes. I remember one morning. My father came in from the market, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. He told my mother, there is fighting near the towns. People are fleeing. I did not understand then what it meant to flee. I thought it was like running a race. But fleeing, Yusuf. Fleeing is running without knowing where you will fall. It is leaving behind not just your house, but your history. Her hands, veined and trembling, clasped together in her lap. That summer, everything changed. Soldiers came through the roads. Rumors of killings, of fires, spread faster than the wind. We stopped playing in the fields. We stopped lighting lamps at night, for fear of drawing attention. Fear became our daily bread. Yusuf stirred, whispering, "Were you scared, Dottie?" Her answer came in a whisper just as soft. "Yes, Beta. More scared than I had ever been. But children do not always show fear." We ran, we laughed, we clung to our mother's dupattas, but inside, our hearts pounded like drums. She leaned forward slightly, her shadow stretching long against the wall. And then, one day, the war arrived at our doorstep. Smoke on the horizon, shouting in the distance. Men running past our fields with terror in their eyes. My father told us, "Pack what you can carry." I had one small bundle, a shawl, a wooden comb, and a half-broken doll my brother had carved for me. That was all I could take of my childhood. Her voice caught. She sipped her cold tea, as though the act could steady her. "Do you know what it feels like, Yusuf? To leave your home not knowing if you will ever see it again?" The boy shook his head slowly, eyes wide, his hand curling tighter around hers. Emmy Jan looked past him. Past the room, past the years. Into a night filled with running feet and the weight of loss. "The road was endless, Yusuf," Emmy Jan whispered. Her eyes locked on some unseen horizon. "When we left the village, we walked barefoot on paths sharp with stones. Children cried, mothers carried infants, old men stumbled behind. Some carried bundles on their heads, others nothing at all. It was not a journey, it was an exodus." The lamp flickered, shadows trembling like the memory itself. I remember my little brother tugging at my hand, asking, "When will we go back?" And I had no answer. My mother pressed her lips together, her face pale but determined. My father walked ahead. Shoulders hunched under more than just the weight of his bundle. He carried the weight of us all. Her breath came slower, heavier. On that road, Yusuf, I saw things no child should see. A cart overturned, belongings scattered in the mud. A woman wailing, clutching a lifeless bundle to her chest. The sound of it still rings in my ears. Hunger gnawed at our bellies, thirst cracked our lips. Sometimes, strangers gave us a sip of water, a piece of dry bread. Other times, we went without. Nights were the worst. We lay under the open sky, our bodies shivering against the cold ground, listening to distant gunfire like thunder no storm could bring. Yusuf's hand tightened in hers. His lips parted, but no words came. Her gaze grew distant again. "Do you know what fear is, Yusuf? Real fear? It is not the dark, nor the sound of storms. It is the knowledge that men can turn into beasts. That neighbors who once shared sugar and stories could one day raise weapons against you." Her voice lowered to almost a whisper. I was 13 the first time I saw blood spill before my eyes. A family ahead of us was attacked on the road. I remember the screams, the rush of feet, the chaos. My father pushed us into the fields, his hand gripping my arm so tightly it left a bruise. He told me, "Do not look back." But I did. And the image never left me. The room fell utterly still. Even the crickets outside seemed to pause. "I learned that day," she said finally, "that childhood can end in a single moment. That laughter can turn to silence, and a doll can be replaced by fear." From then on, Yusuf, I was no longer a girl. I became something else, someone who walked, endured, carried, survived. The boy pressed closer to her side, his little face buried in the folds of her shawl. He did not understand all of it, but he understood enough. That the grandmother before him had walked through fire and lived to tell the tale. And in his young heart, a seed of awe and sorrow took root. "The road finally led us to a camp," Emmy Jan said, her voice heavy yet steady. "A sea of tents, Yusuf, made from torn cloth, stitched together with rope and desperation. The ground was bare, the air thick with smoke and dust. It was not home, but it was all we had." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if she could still smell that air. There were thousands like us. Families huddled close, strangers pressed together by grief. Children coughed through the nights, their ribs showing through their skin. Food was scarce. Sometimes we stood in lines that stretched for hours, waiting for a ladle of thin lentil soup or a piece of dry roti. Other times, there was nothing at all. Yusuf shifted, his young brow furrowed. "Did you eat, Dottie?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Eat?" We learned to stretch hunger like cloth. To patch it with sips of water, to silence it with sleep. My mother would give me her share, pretending she wasn't hungry. But I saw her hands tremble. I learned to take half a bite and save the rest, though my stomach screamed for more. Hunger became a companion, always beside us. Her hands, folded in her lap, tightened. But even in that camp, there were sparks of light. A woman who gave me a mango once, her only one. An old man who carved little toys for children from scraps of wood. A stranger who shared salt, saying, in times like these, even salt is a treasure. Those small kindnesses, Yusuf, were what kept us human. Without them, we would have become no different from the beasts that drove us from our homes. Her eyes glistened. I remember sitting outside the tent one evening, watching the sun bleed red across the sky. I thought to myself, will we live here forever? Will I ever see my village again? I was only a child, but I carried questions too heavy for grown shoulders. The boy pressed his cheek against her arm, whispering, "Did you cry, Dottie?" Her answer came after a pause. "Not then. In the camp, tears felt dangerous. If you cried, you wasted strength. So I swallowed them. But inside, Yusuf, inside I was a river." Her voice softened, almost like a lullaby now. We slept under thin blankets, shivering through cold nights. The ground was hard, but my mother told me, "Close your eyes and dream of fields, dream of mango trees, dream of songs." I did as she said. And sometimes, in dreams, I found home again. The lamp's flame trembled, throwing long shadows on the wall. Emmy Jan sat very still, her memories flowing like water from a well that had been sealed too long. And Yusuf, wide-eyed, silent, drank every word. Emmy Jan's eyes drifted to the flickering lamp, its flame bending and swaying as though it too remembered. Her voice grew quiet, almost a whisper carried by the night. In the camp, Yusuf, we lived between hope and despair. Every day brought whispers, news of villages lost, of families torn apart, of loved ones never found again. We waited for names, for faces, for some sign that the storm would pass. But sometimes, all that came was silence. Her lips trembled as she continued. One evening, I saw my father sitting outside the tent, staring at the dirt. His hands, those strong, calloused hands that once tilled the soil, were trembling. A man had come with news. My father's brother, my cha-cha, was gone. Killed in the violence. Just like that, gone. She paused, the air in the room heavy. I had never seen a man break before. Yusuf. My father wept openly. His shoulders shaking, his voice raw. My mother held him, but there was no comfort to give. That was the night I learned what it meant to lose more than land, more than home. We lost blood. We lost roots. Her scarf slipped slightly as she bowed her head. I sat there, listening to my father's sobs, and something inside me changed. Childhood ended for me that night, truly ended. I felt an iron weight settle on my chest. I thought, I must be strong now. Strong for him, strong for my mother, strong for my little brother. I did not know how, but I knew I must. Her fingers brushed Yusuf's hand, and she looked at him with eyes both fierce and tender. "Do you see, Beta? Sometimes strength is not a choice. It is forced upon you. Like the burden of carrying water or the hunger that will not let you sleep. Strength comes when the world leaves you no other road." Yusuf's throat tightened. He nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He only knew that his grandmother's pain was a mountain, and somehow she had carried it across the years to sit here beside him. Emmy Jan leaned back, her voice steady now, like a flame that refuses to die. "After that, Yusuf, I walked differently. I spoke differently. I no longer asked, when will this end? Instead, I told myself, I will endure. No matter how long it lasts." That is how I survived the war years. Not by waiting for rescue, but by holding hope like a knife, sharp and hidden, in the folds of my heart. She exhaled slowly, the memories settling like dust. That was the war, my child. A season of fire and loss. But it was also the season where I learned what it meant to be unbroken. To bend, to grieve, but not to shatter. The lamp sputtered, its oil nearly gone. Shadows deepened around them. But Yusuf felt only warmth. An inheritance of strength flowing silently from her hand into his. And in that small room, history lived not in books or speeches, but in the trembling voice of a grandmother, and in the wide, listening eyes of a child. The lamp flickered again, its flame thin but steady, a small sentinel holding back the dark. Outside, the night deepened into silence. The kind of silence that makes every word inside a room echo louder, linger longer. Yusuf had shifted closer to his grandmother now, sitting almost against her, his small frame leaning into her warmth. He did not want to miss a single word, as if the act of listening itself might keep her stories alive forever. Emmy Jan sipped the tea that had long gone cold. Her eyes, half-shadowed by the dim light, seemed to gaze not at the boy before her, but into a place far behind him, a place he could not see. "After the war," she began softly, "life was not the same. We returned to no village, no home, only ashes and emptiness. But we were alive, and that was something. Survival itself felt like a victory. Yet survival is not living, Yusuf. To live, one must build again. Her fingers traced the edge of her shawl, tugging at loose threads as she spoke. In the camp, among the ruins of what we had known, families began to plan again. Girls were married young. Boys found work where they could. For many, marriage was not romance, it was survival. 2 hands are better than one. 2 hearts, even broken ones, can carry the weight of life together. She paused, her lips curling into a faint, wistful smile. It was then that I met your grandfather. Yusuf's eyes brightened. Dada? Yes, she whispered, her voice softer now. Your Dada. He was tall, with shoulders bent not from weakness, but from carrying too much responsibility. His hands were always calloused, his voice low and steady. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. Her smile grew fainter, more fragile. He was not a man of flowers or poetry. He never brought me gifts or sang me songs. But in his silence, there was safety. And after the fire of war, Yusuf, safety is a kind of love. The boy tilted his head. Did you love him, Dottie? She chuckled, though her eyes glistened. Love comes in many forms. At first, I did not know what it was. I only knew that he worked hard, that he gave his food to his younger siblings, that he stood between his family and hunger like a wall. That kind of man does not need words. His actions were his love. And slowly, I learned to love him too, not like in the stories. Not with roses and poems, but with bread baked side by side. With burdens carried together. She fell silent for a moment, lost in the warmth of memory. Yusuf leaned forward eagerly. Tell me about your wedding, Dottie. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Ah, our wedding? It was simple, Beta. No grand halls, no silk dresses. My bridal clothes were stitched from fabric donated by neighbors. My jewelry was borrowed. The feast was little more than rice and lentils, yet we shared it with joy. There was laughter, there were songs, even in those hard times. Because marriage was not about riches, it was about beginning again. Her eyes softened. I remember the moment he placed the ring on my finger. It was plain, simple, not gold but silver. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from hope. I thought, perhaps, here is someone with whom I can rebuild. Perhaps, here is a life waiting to be made. She held up her wrinkled hand now, bare but still carrying the ghost of that ring. I wore it until the day it broke. And even then, I kept the pieces. The boy's eyes shone. What was Dada like at home? Her smile widened just a little. He rose before the sun, always. He worked in the fields until his skin was darkened by the sun, his back bent by labor. But when he returned, tired though he was, he always sat with me. Sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing small stories. He had a laugh, Yusuf, rare, but beautiful. When it came, it filled the room like music. Her voice softened. We were poor, terribly poor. Our roof leaked in the rains. Our floor cracked in the heat. But we built a home, small as it was. And in that home, for the first time after years of loss, I felt the warmth of belonging again. She closed her eyes for a moment, as though savoring the ghost of that warmth. Then came children, she said, her lips trembling. First your uncle, then your father, then others after. Each child was both a joy and a burden. Do you know what it means to raise a child when you have nothing, Yusuf? To feed one mouth while your own stomach aches with hunger? To stitch clothes from scraps, to sing lullabies when your heart is breaking. Her eyes brimmed, but her smile did not fade. And yet, they were my light. Each tiny cry, each little hand curling around my finger, it reminded me that even in ashes, life blooms again. Yusuf leaned closer, pressing his cheek against her arm. He could feel the tremble of her body, the weight of memory pressing against her fragile frame. Dottie, he whispered, you were strong. Her laugh was soft, bittersweet. No, Beta. I was not strong. I was only a woman with no choice. Strength is not a gift, it is what remains when everything else is gone. For a moment, the room filled only with the sound of their breaths. The boys steady and light. The grandmothers deep and trembling. Then she spoke again, her voice lower now, shaded by the sorrow of what came next. But Yusuf, marriage is not only joy. Life does not allow happiness to last untouched. With children came illness. With harvests came failures. With love came loss. I will tell you of those, too. Because the story of your grandfather and me is not only of building, but also of breaking. The lamp flickered, casting long, shifting shadows against the wall. The boy held her hand tighter, bracing himself for the storm he sensed in her words. And in the dim light, her voice carried him forward, not into fairy tales, but into the fragile, human truth of a love forged in hardship, tested by sorrow, and remembered through tears. The night outside pressed deeper against the little house. as if the world itself leaned close to listen. The lamp flickered, its glow fragile yet stubborn, like a single heartbeat in a vast darkness. Yusuf sat completely still now, his eyes fixed on his grandmother's face. He could feel it, her story was moving toward something heavier, something that carried the full weight of her years. Jan's gaze dropped to her hands, folded in her lap. They trembled faintly, as though memory itself shook through her bones. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before. A voice pulled from somewhere far beneath the surface. Life gave me love, Yusuf, she said, but it did not leave it untouched. Joy is a guest that never stays long. Sorrow makes its home with you. Her words hung heavy. The boy's little fingers found hers again, holding tight. As though he could keep sorrow away just by being near. She took a long breath. Your grandfather and I, we built our life with nothing but our hands. We had your uncle, then your father, then your aunts. Each child was a lantern in the dark, but each lantern needed oil. Food was always scarce. Every harvest, we prayed for rain. Every winter, we prayed the children would not fall sick. Some nights, I sang them to sleep while their stomachs growled louder than my songs. Her lips trembled. And still, Yusuf, I was happy. Because we were together. Because their little faces, even tired and hungry, still looked at me with trust. I truly thought, I could endure anything, so long as we were together. Her voice faltered then. For a long moment she stared at the lamp, its flame mirrored in her wet eyes. But life? Life does not ask what you can endure. It takes what it wishes. The silence stretched. Yusuf's heart thudded, waiting. She swallowed hard. One winter, illness came. A fever spread through the village. Children fell sick one after another. Their little bodies burning, their eyes glazing. I prayed, Yusuf. I prayed until my knees bruised. I begged Allah to spare mine. But, her voice broke. She pressed the edge of her scarf to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Yusuf climbed into her lap without a word, wrapping his thin arms around her. He didn't understand everything, but he knew she was breaking. When she spoke again, it was a whisper. I lost a daughter. She was only 3. My little Noor. Her name meant light, and for 3 years, she was just that, light in our home. Her laugh could chase away hunger, her eyes shone brighter than the stars. And then, one morning, she did not wake. I held her in my arms, Yusuf. I rocked her as if my arms could bring her back. But her body was still. Cold. My Noor was gone. My baby, gone. Her cry was soft but raw, the kind that tears a silence open. Yusuf clung to her. His own eyes wet now though he had never met. Noor. He buried his face against her chest. As if to give her comfort with his small warmth. The house had grown utterly still. Even the wind outside seemed to have hushed itself, as though it too leaned in to listen. The lamp on the small wooden table glowed faintly, its flame tired but resolute. Jan shifted her shawl around her shoulders. The weight of her stories had left her chest heavy. But in her eyes there was a quiet light now. Like embers that glow long after the fire burns low. Yusuf sat close against her side. His little fingers playing absent-mindedly with the tassels of her shawl. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Yusuf, in his small but earnest voice, asked. Dottie, after everything? What do you think life really is? The question lingered in the room, delicate as dust in a sunbeam. Jan looked at him, truly looked. As if seeing not just her grandson but the generations yet to come through him. Life, she began, her voice slow, is not what we imagine when we are young. We dream of happiness without sorrow. Love without loss, journeys without obstacles. But the truth, Yusuf, is different. She placed her hand gently over his. Life is both, the sweet and the bitter. The day and the night. The joy of holding your child, and the grief of burying her. The pride of building a home, and the pain of leaving it behind. If you accept only the sweetness, you will suffer. But if you accept both, you will grow strong. Yusuf's eyes widened. As if the words were pebbles thrown into the still waters of his young mind. Creating ripples he could not yet measure. Jan smiled faintly. When I was young, I thought strength meant never crying. I thought it meant carrying everything without bending. But I learned, my child, that true strength is different. True strength is crying when your heart demands it. And still waking up the next morning to begin again. Her wrinkled hand moved to his hair, smoothing it gently. Strength is not hardness. It is softness that survives. She sighed softly. Another thing I learned, never measure your life by what you own. Houses crumble, land is lost, money flows away like water. But love, Yusuf, love remains. The arms that hold you when you are weak. The voice that comforts you in the dark. The hand that reaches for yours. These are the treasures worth guarding. She paused, her eyes misting. Your grandfather and I, we had little, but we had each other. And though I lost children, I also had children who lived, who grew, who carried pieces of me forward. Love is the only wealth that never fades. Yusuf rested his head against her arm. His small voice trembling, I love you, Dottie. Her heart clenched, her lips pressing against his forehead. And I love you, Beta. More than words. Her gaze drifted again to the window, where the night pressed like a curtain of velvet. Time is strange, she said quietly. When you are young, it feels endless. You think you have forever. But as the years pass, you see how quickly it slips away. Days turn into years, and the faces you love grow faint, like photographs left too long in the sun. She sighed. But memory keeps them alive. Noor's laugh, your grandfather's steady hands, my mother's lullabies, they live here. She tapped her heart. And when I tell them to you, Yusuf, they will live here. She touched his chest. His small hand pressed over hers. Then they will never die. Her smile was soft, sorrowful, but full of hope. Yes. That is why I speak, even though it hurts. Stories are the bridge across time. Without them, we are lost. With them, we belong to something bigger than ourselves. She leaned back, her body weary but her spirit fierce. So listen, my child, and carry these truths with you. Do not fear loss, it is the proof that you have loved. Do not curse hardship, it is the teacher that shapes you. Do not cling to possessions, they will leave you. Cling instead to people, to kindness, to faith. And remember always, even in the longest night, dawn will come. Her words settled into the air like prayers. Yusuf sat in silence, his young heart swelling with something he couldn't fully name. Awe, sadness, love, all braided together. He squeezed her hand, as if to promise that he would remember every word. The lamp sputtered, its flame small but steady. The room was filled not with silence now, but with the weight of wisdom, ancient and fragile yet eternal. Jan closed her eyes for a moment, her breathing deep but calm. Yusuf stayed beside her, listening to the rhythm of her breaths, as though learning the song of endurance itself. Here the spotlight shifts more toward Yusuf, how he receives his grandmother's wisdom, how his innocence brings light back to her, and how their love binds past and future together. The room felt softer now, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the grandmother's words and were holding them gently, like sacred echoes. The lamp's glow wrapped the pair in a cocoon of warmth. A fragile universe where only two souls existed, one carrying the weight of nearly a century, the other just beginning his journey. Yusuf lifted his face from Jan's shawl, his eyes shining. He studied her carefully, as though memorizing every wrinkle, every flicker of expression. Dottie, he whispered, when you are gone? Will I still feel you here? He pressed a hand over his heart, mimicking the gesture she had made earlier. The question pierced her like an arrow. She looked down at him, at his innocent eyes filled with fear of loss, and her heart ached with both pain and pride. Yes, Beta, she murmured, stroking his hair. You will feel me in every story I've told you. In the prayers I whisper for you. In the kindness you give to others. I will live in you, and in the children you will one day tell these stories to. That is how we remain. Yusuf frowned softly, still unconvinced. But I don't want you to go. Ever. Her lips trembled into a smile, tender and sad. If love alone could keep me here forever, Yusuf, I would never leave your side. But this body. She lifted her hand, showing the trembling, the thin skin stretched over bone. This body grows tired. Only Allah decides how long our breath will stay. What we can do is fill that breath with love while it lasts. Yusuf held her hand between both of his, as if trying to pour his small strength into her. Then I promise, he said earnestly, I'll remember everything. I'll remember Noor, and Dada, and your stories. I'll even remember the night is long but dawn always comes. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. She pulled him closer, kissing the crown of his head. That is all I ask, my son. Promise me also one more thing. What, Dottie? Promise me you will live with kindness. That when life gives you pain, you will not pass that pain to others. Carry it, learn from it, but do not let it turn your heart hard. Can you promise me this? Yusuf nodded fiercely, his little fists clenched with determination. I promise. I'll be strong and soft, like you said. Strong enough to carry, soft enough to love. Her smile broke through her tears, radiant despite the sorrow. Ah, Yusuf. You already understand more than many grown men. The heaviness in the room lightened for a moment as Yusuf tilted his head. Dottie, when you were young, did you ever get in trouble? Did Nana scold you? She chuckled, the sound like an old melody returning. Oh, many times. Once, when I was newly married, I burned the bread so badly the whole kitchen filled with smoke. Your grandfather teased me for weeks. He would say, my wife can feed me clouds instead of food. Yusuf giggled, eyes crinkling. Did you get angry? Of course. I told him if he didn't like my bread, he could cook himself. She laughed softly, shaking her head. But he never stopped eating what I made. That is love, Yusuf. Not perfection, just loyalty. The boy leaned against her again. comforted not just by her wisdom but by the glimpse of playfulness in her past. After a while, silence returned, softer this time. Ami Jan closed her eyes, whispering a short prayer under her breath. Yusuf listened, the words unfamiliar but soothing, like a lullaby woven from faith itself. When she finished, he asked, "Dottie, why do you always pray after telling me stories?" She smiled gently. "Because stories are seeds. Prayers are water. Together, they grow in the heart." Yusuf thought about this, nodding slowly. Then he whispered his own little prayer. Clumsy but sincere: "Allah, please keep my Dottie safe. Please make her strong, and please let me always remember her stories." Ami Jan's eyes filled again, but this time with tears of joy. She pressed her forehead against his. "Amin, my love. Amin." The bond between them shimmered in that small room. Brighter than the lamp, stronger than the night outside. Old and young, past and future. Sorrow and love, all intertwined in a single embrace. The night had deepened into a velvet quiet, pressing its cool face against the small windows of the house. The lamp on the table flickered low, its flame thinning like a tired breath. Shadows gathered in the corners. But around Ami Jan and Yusuf, the glow held firm, as though refusing to surrender. Ami Jan leaned back against the cushion, her body frail, her eyelids heavy. She had spoken more in these few hours than she had in weeks. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath deep and deliberate. Yusuf remained close, his little hand still clinging to hers, afraid that if he let go, she might slip away. For a